Well, happy Monday, everybody, and welcome to Act 3 on CHLY 101.7 FM. I have a bit of a treat for you today. I know you're so excited. It's been a while since I've spoken to you. As you know, you've had some repeats of performances in the last little while. I've been away with the United Way doing a whole bunch of fabulous work within community. And so this is my first week back in a little while. And so my special guest is an old friend of mine, somebody that I went to high school with. I've known her forever in a handbasket. Ellen Jorgensen is with us today, and Ellen is a fantastic writer. We're going to learn all about that on today's episode of Act 3. Welcome to the program, Ellen. How are you?
I'm feeling great this morning, Kathy. It's so great to see you again.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Oh my gosh, how long? Probably 30 years, I think, since I've seen you, and in person, that is.
Well, now there was that high school reunion, girl. There was that
Oh,
high school
yes, yes,
reunion.
yes, that's right. So we had the high school reunion, which was our 30-year high school reunion. And I think
I
we
think
also had, there was something else that had come up where I had seen you. Either way, it doesn't matter. I'm super glad to see you again. How are things going? I know you don't live in BC, you live in Alberta, right?
I do. I live in the countryside just outside of Red Deer. And for those who aren't familiar with Alberta, Red Deer is almost smack dab in the middle between Edmonton and Calgary.
Yes. I know Red Deer really well. First time I ever listened to Blue Rodeo was, well, not the first time I listened. The first concert I was at was in Red Deer, and my
Oh,
family, of course, lives just outside of Edmonton and Drayton Valley, so I understand the area quite well. But it's good that have you guys got snow yet? Because I think just about everybody I know in that area right now has had at least one dump.
oh yeah. No, we had like a dump that continued for about 3 days, and we normally don't get snow this early in the season. It's normally a February, March type thing. But this year it's like they decided to hammer us right from the get-go. So we got a good 20, 25 centimeters.
Oh my gosh, that's a ton. We had snow here on Vancouver Island, but it was like it kind of came in and went out. It didn't really stick for very long. And because I think we have one snowplow for the whole island. I'm not sure, but we don't get snow. We're not used to it. We're not really here to talk too much about the weather, but it's really great to connect and let people know how far away you are from where we are at the moment. But listen,
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious. You, in this last 20 years, have started a writing career, and I understand that you've done quite well for yourself. You've written a few books now. What brought you to writing?
It's been a long road, actually. It probably started back in high school because you go to school all day, and I would come home just feeling stressed, tired, and just needed that little break. And as you remember, I was kind of a type A overachiever back then. I probably still am. But I would come home and I would just lay down on my bed, stare at the ceiling, and tell myself stories in my head. And I shared a few of them with some close friends, and they'd always say, "Oh, you should write that down." But of course, I never did for years and years. And then one day, my husband also said, "Why don't you write these down?" So, yeah, the first book I wrote, not the first I published, the first I wrote actually came together in a long drive from Red Deer to Prince George to visit my in-laws. And it was just a boring drive. And I just started thinking the story in my head, and it just congealed. And mind you, it went through a few edits and a couple changes, but that's where it started. And yeah, it turned out to be that was my second novel that I published, which was Never Alone.
So let's talk a little bit about your genre. What kind of a genre is the story that you tell yourself in your head that goes to paper? Is it a romance? Is it a suspense? Like what kind of genre?
So I like to tell people I write romantic suspense with an inspirational twist. So,
Okay, let's unpack that.
yeah, okay. So mostly romance,
Yeah.
but I find I like romance where the stakes are a little higher and there's a little danger involved. I don't get into anything too dark.
Hmm. Yep.
Um,
Yeah, you're not a dark
because it
person.
is romance. I don't want it to be too dark, but I do want my reader on the edge of their seat, flipping pages, unable to put it down.
Right.
So I put a little danger in there, a little thrill, a little bit of anxiety to keep people involved. And then there's always this element of the divine as well.
Of
You know,
course.
that's, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Actually,
so
that's my
it just,
favorite part of the romance novel thing is I love to have the story of how two people come together. I love how the story goes when there is that little bit of a thrill, but having the element of the divine is just such an important feel good moment. And it's really bound in faith and on top of it. So I think that that in itself just makes for the perfect book.
thank you. Yes, I agree. It's because we're physical beings,
Hmm.
we're intellectual and emotional beings, but we're
Right.
also spiritual beings, right?
Yes,
And
indeed.
if you can include all of that, then I feel like you've got something that everyone can relate to.
Yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that first novel and the process of getting published and, taking it from, head to hand to script to book. What was the process like for
Well,
you?
group called Carwa, which
Hmm.
is the Calgary Association of the Romance Writers of America. And last time I checked, we're actually the only Canadian chapter of the RWA. But there is a wonderful group of women and one fella who are actually fairly prolific writers, and they're just a wonderful group. And I was invited to be part of a group project. And they said, we're going to do a project. We want to have, we want to create a town. We want to create a hotel. We want to write a book for every month of the year for the whole year. And we want it all to tie in together. So we're going to have some core characters that everyone can use. And then you can create your own main characters. And we're going to weave this all together into a 12 book series.
Wow.
12 individual romance novels with an underlying romance that weaves its way through all 12 books. And I said, yes, I have to be part of this. But of course, a group project means deadlines.
Yes, it does.
Deadlines,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
I had, we discussed this in January. I had to have an outline done by the middle of February. I had to have my rough draft done by the beginning of July. And I had to have my edits completed, I believe, by August, so that we could start releasing one book a week
Wow.
to culminate with just prior to Christmas. So these books started releasing, I believe, early October. One, or maybe they started releasing September, like one book a week. So we got all 12 books released by the end of the year. And it was a fantastic process because there would be, so much back and forth. We actually had one of our members looked up the sun and moon charts to make sure that we were correct on those. Somebody actually wrote and designed a town layout, so we know what the names of the streets were, and we knew where the hotel was located, and we knew where how to get to, like, in my book, one of the feature places in my book was the Wobbly Dog, which was the local pub and stripper bar. Where my
Very important to have a local bar and a stripper bar in a town.
exactly, right? And this was, we created this town as a ski town in the Rocky Mountains in Alberta is what we created, right?
Yeah.
We manufactured this town. And so yeah, it was a super interesting project because they'd have, I remember having a conversation with one girl. I'm going to have your character do this, okay? And I'm like, no, no, my character would never do that, you know, because your characters, if you've done them well, they become real to you. They
Of
have
course,
personality.
absolutely,
They
for
have,
sure.
you know, they have motivations, and they have things that they would absolutely do and things that they would not ever do.
Yeah.
And then there's situations that they would get themselves stuck in, I guess, you know?
Yeah. So do you, just because of the way that you worded all of that, because I agree with you, right? Like I can totally see how that the character becomes a part, right? So I'm curious, did you live vicariously through the character then?
Um, I think, you know, in absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, and any good book that I read,
Yeah.
if they've done it well, I'm in that heroine's place.
Yes. Yes.
I'm,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that's what I love best about fiction is I can leave my life behind with its problems,
Yeah.
and I can slip into somebody else's life for a little while and deal with their problems and know that those problems are going to get solved by the end of this, one way or the other.
Of course. And to me that makes perfect sense. Life in itself is very complex. We have all of this. It's one of the reasons why I cannot, I know a lot of people can, but a lot of people pick up books and they're now doing it through technology, right? They're reading it in their Kobos or they're reading it in the other way.
Yeah.
I still need to turn the page. I still need to smell the book. I still want to, there's something about getting immersed in the pages. And I don't think it's possible for me to actually comfortably read in any other way. Are you when you're reading the characters and you're developing the characters, um, are there growth spurts that happen with you as a direct result of the character that you're building?
Me personally in my life?
Yeah,
That is a good question. I mean, I think for authors, you know, when you create a character, it's almost like giving birth, you know, like
sure.
something's coming out of you, something's
Yeah.
creating out of you. I'm not sure if the characters change me so much as perhaps they reveal me.
Ah, beautiful.
You know, they reveal things maybe that I like about myself, or maybe things that I would like to change about myself.
Sure.
They become maybe what I would like to become,
Hmm.
and maybe aren't there yet. On the other hand, too, sometimes you pull characters from a place in your imagination, or you can pull characters from somebody who is a problem to you,
Yeah,
and you can use their flaws to create other characters, protagonists, antagonists, out of your story. You know, they say never piss off an author, or she might put you in her next book, and you might not like what you read.
well, that's quite funny, actually. I mean, and I understand that. I entirely value that because I know a few authors and I try my best to read everybody's book. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to read yours yet, Ellen. I know I will, but at the end of the day, I'm always curious about what happens with the writer's mind, right? Like, where do the pieces of the puzzles come together? And in sort of in complement to that, because you have
Mhm.
written more than one book, do you have a favorite character and who is it and why?
Mm. Oh, that's a good one. I haven't thought of that. I love all my characters. I think maybe my favorite character is the hero in my book Never Alone, Mark. Just because he's very strong, very macho, and yet in a very vulnerable position when we meet
Yeah.
him. And that juxtaposition of strength and vulnerability is really attractive to me. I really like that character
Is he
quite a
modeled
bit.
after your husband by chance?
No, actually, no, he isn't. Uh, I love my husband dearly, but
Of
no, my
course, of
husband hasn't
course.
shown up in a book yet. I have.
It might be safer that way when you think about it, right?
I think so. Mind you, he's not much of a reader, so he hasn't read my stuff either.
I think when it comes to romance novels, it's hard to get a guy to actually, regardless of who it is, that they may not necessarily be, inclined to read that kind of genre. And I'm always supportive of those that do, but I know that lots don't. So when I think about the process of writing a book, I know, you talked a little bit about the planning stages, especially as it relates to working with the 12 books, right? That the
Mhm.
team was kind of coming together as a part of your association. But in general, without being part of the team, just on your own, how long does it take for you to actually put pen to paper and finish a project? Is it something that comes naturally, easily, or is it something that takes a long period of time? What's your process?
Once I actually put my butt down and start writing, I can lose 2, 3, 4 hours easily. I just get right into it and I look up and I'm like, oh my gosh, is it that late already? I gotta go to bed. Um, but the procrastination up to the point of sitting down and writing, yeah, that can be hard to deal with because, I'm still a mom. I still have kids at home. I have other responsibilities, and those things sometimes push out of the
Yeah.
way. That's why kind of the group project was excellent because it pushed me forward, and I was working with other women who had successfully published, and so I had their knowledge and expertise to draw upon. But once I'd done that first book, then I was able to publish my second book independently. It had been mostly written at that point. I just had to go through and do some edits. Um, but I think the hardest part for every author is bum and chair, hand on keyboard.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
we talk about writing, we think about writing, we dream about writing, we join classes about writing. We do everything except write.
Yes. Yes. I understand entirely. You know, I,
But yeah, once you actually discipline yourself and start putting words on paper, then the flow happens really well. Um,
but I would think that that procrastination part is the part which, it maybe sounds a little on the negative side because it's procrastination and we always associate procrastination with being, not necessarily, the key to success, right? Because it takes so long. But at the end of the day, procrastination also allows the buckets for that knowledge to kind of fall into, right? And that
yeah,
development and to find the right words and to sort of do it. I mean, I think like all great art, you require the time in order to polish the characters that you want to build so that people are actually reading through the words into the story. Do you know what I mean?
absolutely. And one of the things we do is when you're trying to create a character, you'll say, okay, what's their biggest fear?
Yes.
What's their biggest fear? Okay, why? Why is this such a problem for them? You figure that part out. Okay, now how am I going to make them face that fear in this book? What's going to happen that they're going to have to come face to face with this biggest fear and deal with it, you know? And I mean, there's lots of helps out there if you want them, things that 20 questions that you could ask about each character and fill in those answers and create a character that's so real that you feel like if you met them on the street you would recognize them instantly. And if
I
you
love
you
how you
build
worded
your
that. And
character.
I love how you worded that. And I don't want to go off that topic because that's something there. So I'm curious about those 20 questions because really, And I love how you created the life of the character by using those 20 questions, because it's more than just, Sam or Joe or Frank or Henry or whatever. They did this, they did that. That's a one-dimensional character. But a thriving character has so much more to it. So let's talk about some of those questions if you don't mind, because they are, I think, critical to development of a good storyline.
Hmm.
And where did the questions come from?
Um, I think I first come across the idea in a workshop on character development.
Yeah,
And I mean, the questions aren't set in stone. It's not like
of
there's
course, of
20
course.
specific ones,
Sure.
but you would ask yourself, okay, what's my character's goal? And what's their external goal? What's the external thing that they're trying to accomplish?
Mm,
But then what's the internal goal? What's the
mhm.
heart goal? What's that again, that core fear that they're trying to avoid, that I need to make them face, that they must overcome. And then you kind of say, well, what's their birthday? Well, that's kind of weird for a story of somebody who's not real. But what's their birthday? Okay, because we can sometimes use zodiac for personality traits, for flaws and positive characters. Where did they grow up? What were their parents like? What was their childhood like? What was the trauma that they endured that created the person they are now? Um, what's their deepest desire? And what's stopping them from getting it? Um,
Sure.
things like that, like once you can create that, then, it creates this real person that then you can torture in your book because you don't want them to have an easy journey. You want them to have things to overcome, and when they, you know, and decisions to make.
Sure.
And and that's an important thing too. Like you don't want to just keep throwing random things at your character like they're on a roller coaster and they're just hanging on and going up and down for the ride.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want to throw situations where they have to make a choice, and it's
Hmm.
their choice that's now driving the story, not just random circumstance where they're floating in the boat going down the river and they have no control. You want to force them to choose between something difficult and something even worse, you know.
Yes, it moves from that static place to a very dynamic and robust storyline where you're really, you're following the journey of a day in a life or a month in a life or a week in a life and what that might actually look like.
Right.
We're just going to take a quick moment here, Ellen, if you don't mind. I just need to do a little bit of station identification and we'll be right back in just a second.
Absolutely.
So everybody, if you've just tuned in, you are listening to Act 3 on CHLY 101.7 FM. We are absolutely 1,000% delighted that you are here. Thank you so much for joining us each and every Monday at 1 o'clock. We really appreciate it. We also appreciate it if you are listening to us on our channel on YouTube. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for liking. And certainly thank you so much for sharing. We do love to have your input. So feel free to write us a note. We're super glad to hear from you. And of course, there's the television program. So just so you know, there's a little bit of a hiatus on our show this for the Act 3 program on Shaw Spotlight. We'll be returning back to the studio this January. Can't wait to do that, but we've still got a bit of time before that to put together some of the best shows that you'll see on the Lower Mainland. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're super glad that you do. So right now, there's a few things that are happening within our community, right? This is the middle of a November issue when you hear this. And if you're listening to an encore performance, you might be listening to this in the early part of December. What I want you to know is that this is the time to give, to support, and to look after the people that you love within community. We know that right now the Salvation Army could really use your time. whether it's on the kettle or whether or not you're going into their thrift stores and purchasing things, whether you're donating any which way you want to, any of the different toy drives, please, this is the time we start thinking about the jingle jingle and the jangle jangle that help support our community to be supported in ways that we really need to right now with this economic situation that we're going through. So please make sure you do that. If Sally Ann isn't your cup of tea, there's a load of places where you can go. This is the time to think about other people. So please make sure you donate and donate generously. Coming back to the program, though, I do want you to know that we've got some great guests lined up over the next little while. But in the booth today, the Zoom booth, I might add, is Ellen Jorgensen. She is an old friend of mine and a fabulous writer, and I'm super glad that she's joining us today. If you hear the tip tapping in the background, because this is Zoom, sometimes you will hear different noises or challenges. I've not gone back into studio. I've continued to do this over Zoom for the last while. And so my hope is that you will just not even notice the little bangs and the sounds of barking dogs or street lights going by or whatever happens to be going on, banging on keyboards, stuff like that. That is all part of the journey when you're listening to a radio show. So thanks so much for participating with us today. We'll get right back to the program. So Ellen, I'm like, it's wonderful to see you. I feel like no time has gone by, you know, when we're face to face like this. I know in Radio Land they don't realize we're face to face, but we are. And so I've been inspired by the idea that you have really taken this wonderful craft of writing and you've taken it to the next level. And so I'm curious about what inspires you to write. Like what, I know we talked at the beginning of sort of a bit of the process and all of that stuff, but was there a moment in time after you wrote your first book, I'll say, not in the process, because it sounds like you've had a lot of encouragement in your life to do this from your family, friends, and so forth. But after your first book, what propelled you to go, oh yeah, I love this, I want to keep doing it?
Hmm. I don't know. I think it's just the joy of creating.
Yeah.
Um, and it's almost like authors have these little voices in their heads and your characters demanding that you tell their story. And they jump up and down and they say, what about my story? My story. You haven't written my story yet. I have one in the back of my mind now that I actually just was working on plotting it, and it's about a disgruntled time traveling assassin who, yes, yes, who has been sent. She's going to be sent back to Regency England to kill somebody for the company that she works for. What she doesn't realize is the person she's being sent back to kill is her own ancestor. You see, they want to get rid of her, and they figure the easiest way for them to get rid of her is if they hire her to do it themselves, to do it herself.
Oh
So,
my
so this
goodness,
is a kernel of an idea that I have in my head, and she keeps demanding I tell her story.
I love how that kind of a character can come in. I mean, I can't even imagine you thinking about having an assassin that's going to kill themselves in the future, somewhere in the future. She's time traveling, right? To be able to do that.
Exactly. So, of course, there's going to be some issues come up, see?
You think?
But that's the kernel of an idea I've got going, and I have her side of this story kind of etched out, and I'm still working on his side of the story because, of course, everything I write is a bit of a romance, you know. But I like throwing in other elements. I like keeping it really interesting, and I like keeping my reader guessing about
Yeah.
what's going
Yeah.
to happen.
How do people find your books, by the way, Ellen? Are they easy to come by? Like, how do people resource them? By the way, usually during my station identification, I tell people to go get a piece of paper and a pen. I forgot to do that today, but grab a paper and a pen because you're going to want to figure out how you can get to Ellen's stories, right? So for our listeners, can you give them an idea of how they can find you?
So all of my stories are available through my webpage, which is www.ellenjorgy, that's ELLENJORGY.com or .ca.
So where
And
did Georgie come from? You decided not to have Jorgensen. Why didn't you use your full name?
well, there's an Ellen Jorgensen on YouTube who's a physicist, and she does all kinds of YouTube.
Oh, I see.
And yeah, and so, but my nickname from one of my friends way back was Georgie.
Yes.
And when I Googled Ellen Georgie, there wasn't any others. So here I am. Ta-da!
Ta-da!
Yeah. So anyways, all my books are available on Amazon, either .com or .ca, and they are available as a ebook format or as a paperback, depending on your preference. And you can find links to that through my website at ellengeorgie.com. And yeah, we also have a special right now. My latest novel was a Christmas themed romantic
Oh, great.
suspense.
Let's talk about that. 'Tis the
It's
season.
called, I have it right here, Safe in His Safe in His Arms at Christmas. And
Beautiful.
I set this book actually right here in central Alberta, and I used a couple of real places in the book, although the story is fiction. There are some real places and real events that I reference in the book. And last year, again, a group of us from the Romance Writers of America, the Calgary chapter, we got together and put together an anthology. So there are 8 Christmas themed romances available. And that is in an anthology called Hugs, Kisses, and Mistletoe Wishes.
How
That is
lovely.
available only as an electronic format because otherwise it would be like 3 miles thick
Of course,
in
it'd be a
paperback.
heavy book. Yeah, for sure.
And it's available right now for 99 cents on sale.
Oh my gosh, that's nothing.
Yeah, I know. It's like 8 romances for 99 cents. Like it's a no-brainer. Just
It's a
just go get it.
no-brainer. Just go
It's a
get it.
no-brainer.
Just
Just
go
go
get
get
it.
it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and there is a link to that one also through my website. So
Fantastic. Well, we're going to touch base on your website again shortly, but before we do, let's talk a little bit more about how. Well, let's talk about publishing as a whole. Publishing for many people. I know a lot of people that are interested in writing,
mhm.
and many do end up self-publishing. But there's a science almost to publishing. How's the experience been for you?
Well, it's definitely been a learning curve. It's
Sure.
definitely been a learning curve. And I would, recommend anyone who is looking to publish to, I would say, find a local writers group where they're actually writing and publishing,
Hmm.
you know, because there's lots of groups where they talk about writing, but they don't actually publish anything. Find a group where people are publishing
Yeah.
and learn from them. Learn from them. The wonderful thing about being in 2022 is that anyone can publish. And the terrible thing is that anyone can publish.
Yeah.
Okay? So
Yeah.
if you're going to self-publish, make sure you do your diligence. You need people to proofread your work. Make sure it's consistent, make sure it's good, and don't be too proud to correct things that people say, hey, this isn't working for me. Not that you have to listen to everybody, but if 3 people tell you the same thing, you need to
It's
look at it.
probably, yeah, yeah, it's probably
Yeah,
worth
you need
taking a
to look
peek
at
at.
it,
Yeah.
right? And then pay for proper line editing. I mean, there's nothing that will pull you out of a story faster than a glaring typo or
Hmm.
or or bad grammar, or your punctuation's bad, or just it's just weird stuff sometimes happens when you in the process of taking what you've written on your computer and formatting it. Make sure you format properly, learn how to format, or pay someone to format for you so that if somebody is reading on their ebook,
Yeah.
they don't have big gaps and overlapping things. You want the reading experience to be pleasurable. You want people to
Absolutely.
disappear into your story,
Absolutely.
and stupid mistakes will just pull you out of the story because you're like, what? Yeah. So, spend the money, take the time to make sure it's as perfect as you can make it before you put it out into the world, because it
I
makes a
think that's
difference.
really, really important advice because I think you're quite right. There's a lot of people that are wannabe authors that don't actually do the due diligence that they need to do in order to find their successes. And then they are often disappointed by the writing process because they
Yep.
don't get the results that they want. There's something about being humbled by your work, right? And just being
Right.
allowing the universe to do its job and to direct you and direct your steps so that you're getting the right advice as well. I'm curious about that whole process because I've seen myself when I've written something, even whether it's for work or for whatever, um, and I find that when I'm staring at the computer long enough, it looks like it's perfect. It's edit, there's not a single thing wrong with it, and I've learned to walk away for a few days on something like that, and then go
Yep.
back and revisit it, and only then can I truly see where the errors are because we get lost in get lost in the type, get lost in the paper. Have
Well,
you
and
learned?
you, hmm?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was saying, like, you read what you think should be there,
That's right.
not necessarily what you actually put down. Like your
Exactly.
your your eyes will skip over if you put the word "and" in there twice in a row. Your mind's only going to see it once. It's just going to completely skip over the second one. Here's a trick: get your computer to read it to you,
Oh, interesting.
because the computer will read exactly what you put there, and you'll hear it right away if you've done something dumb,
What
because
a
the computer,
great,
yeah,
oh, what a great tip.
yeah.
So we have a lot of listeners on Vancouver Island and on the West Coast, but we also CHLY 101.7 is also part of our university college radio programming.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to me that tip alone, how many essays could be really well received if we would just listen to them before they get sent out. What a wonderful tip that is. That's very
Yep.
cool for everybody, anybody. That's really cool. So, and I was actually going to go into the question of what kind of things have you learned in the process as far as that publishing piece is concerned, as far as it goes, as the whole, like the art, the time, the expectations. How do you manage the expectations of publishing?
My expectations or other people's?
Both.
Um, I'm not sure I had very many expectations prior to first publishing. I really had no experience whatsoever. So for me, it was jumping into the great unknown.
Yeah.
Um, I was fortunate to be surrounded by some really wonderful people
Hmm.
who had gone before me and
Yeah.
were willing to mentor me and share their experience. And that's really important, I think. It's a lost thing in our society, this mentorship
Hmm.
of people who've gone before you. Now, um, for mentorship to work, the learner must be humble enough to accept accept the advice and take it. If you're going to be too proud to listen to somebody else, you're not going to get too far. Um, but and as far as other people's expectations, um, yeah, again, I'm not sure if there was too many expectations. I mean, I think for me, initially, I had the idea that the only way to publish would be to traditionally publish, to find a publisher, to convince them that my work was worthy, to get them to publish it for me. And then if I did that, they would do all the hard work. They would do all the marketing. They would do all of this, that, and the other. And the reality has been, the problem with traditional publishing is you can have a wonderful book, but it doesn't fit what they're looking for
Mm,
at the moment, or it
sure.
doesn't fit in their schedule for the moment.
Mhm.
I believe I believe the writer of Jonathan Livingston Seagull, I believe he was rejected 21 times. And then I believe the poor man committed suicide. And then his mother submitted it one last time, and it was accepted, and it was published, and it became a classic. Um, and the publishing, traditional publishing, has kind of held the reins for so long. And the wonderful thing now about self-publishing is if your book doesn't fit what they're looking for, if your book is kind of a hybrid in between this and the other, if your book is just a little bit out there and not quite what the current trend is, there is a venue open for you. And so then you can put your book out there. But now that means you need to do the marketing. You need to do the selling of it. And a lot of authors struggle with that because we're creative types rather than business oriented types
Sure.
often.
Absolutely. Mhm.
But it's a learned thing. You can learn.
Mhm.
And what I've found with traditional publishing is that even if you get traditionally published, a lot of these publishing houses, they expect you to do your own marketing. They expect you to get out there and promote your own work as well. So it's not like if you can get traditionally published that all of a sudden that responsibility is gone.
Yeah,
You're
so
going to
true.
have it either way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, so if your work doesn't fit into the right cookie cutter shape for the traditional market at the moment, having the self-publishing option is a really wonderful thing. The only caveat to that is make sure your work is polished before you put it out there. Because if you
Yeah.
put it out unpolished, not in its best format, you're going to get a reputation. You'll get a reputation either way. You want people to think when they read your book, oh, that author's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Or
Because otherwise,
exactly. Exactly.
mm-hmm.
And I personally, I think that that's a very important point as well, because I think that like everything that we do in life, not everybody is going to want to do the work that we do, or like the work we do, or see the work we do, or get the understand the vision or the mission or what have you. However, that there is always an audience, and we want to give that audience, whoever that audience is, the very best of ourselves every single time. And that's not always easy for a creative type, because it is that visionary piece. I've known a lot of authors who've said the exact same thing as you have, Ellen. They've said, listen, if you think that you're going to be on a Chapters bookstore, or on, any of the main shelves of some of the, Barnes and Noble, or any of the larger stores, for every one of those that are on the shelf, there are thousands of people that are not on the shelf, that have equally or better writing. And so to be
Mm-hmm.
aware that, that there's other ways that marketing can help you, and not to be afraid of publishing just because it may not be picked up at the time, as you pointed out so eloquently, in the flavor of the week or the month or the year of what that publisher is looking for. It doesn't mean that your work isn't worthy by any shape of the imagination. Yeah.
What I have discovered from working with my colleagues and compatriots is, like, the best thing an author can do is, if you write a book, publish it, and then write the next one. Because once you have some books in your arsenal, once you've got 3 or 4 or 5 out there, then when you really start marketing and you really start pushing the latest one, when people find it and they're like, oh, I like this author, what else do they have out there?
Right.
Now you have other books that you've already written. You have something, oh, look, she's got other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or,
Absolutely.
if sometimes people will write a trilogy, or they will write books in a group, like romance writers, we often will Maybe the one your listeners might be most familiar with right now is Netflix is Bridgerton.
Yes.
Well, the author wrote about a family of 8 siblings. So each sibling has a story. Each sibling has a story of their romance and finding their person. And so once you realize, you read one book of hers and it's like, I love this author. What else has she got? Oh my gosh, there's 8. You know,
Yes.
as a
Yeah,
reader, you're in heaven. This is
of
this is
course.
book heaven, you know.
You know,
um,
but you make a good point. Just even this weekend, I was in Vancouver last week on business, and when I was there, another friend of ours came up from Seattle, and so I said to her, because she's an avid reader, I said, "Honey, you know, what's on your bedside table? Like, what are you reading now? Like, what's happening?" And she took me to this section, and there were 8 or 9 different pieces. So she goes, "You once you start with this one, you won't want to put it down." And so I love the idea of what you're saying, where you have a little bit of a library of your own almost to say, okay, this is somebody I just absolutely love to read. And I think many of the successful authors really have that. I'm curious, however, what's on your bedside table? What do you enjoy reading? Besides the writing part, what is it that you love? Who's your author?
oh my goodness, I have so many. I even I I write romantic suspense, but I read almost anything. I do prefer fiction because I do like the escapism. I would say probably my favorite author would be Diana Gabaldon and
Okay.
her Outlander series.
Yes,
And because her characters are so rich and so complete, and I feel like they're my family. I know them. I just finished reading Brenda Novak, and she does like a romantic suspense. But I mean, I have like 3 or 4 bookshelves full of stuff that I've read. I used to read a lot of fantasy and science fiction fantasy. I read a lot of romance. I do like Katie Cross.
hmm,
She writes steampunk, if you're
cool.
familiar with that. And she's actually, I think she writes for a young adult
Hmm,
level,
hmm.
but I enjoy her writing. I enjoy her characters very much. Um, yeah, so that's kind of what's on my bedside right now.
If you could pick a mentor of the writers that you've read or of writers that you have been influenced by, is there a person that comes to mind for you in a mentorship arena? We talked a little earlier about being mentored by some of your colleagues and friends, but is there, from an author's perspective, author to author, who might that be?
Hmm. Um, Maybe Stina Holmes.
Stina
Now,
Holmes, good name. She's got a great name. Just saying. Wink, wink,
Stina
wink.
Holmes. Okay, so Stina Holmes, I actually know her. She
Uh-huh.
was actually part of our group for a while. She wrote a book that was more of a woman's fiction,
Sure.
and she tried for several years to publish this book, and nobody was interested. Nobody would take it. So she finally decided she would self-publish it, and somehow she figured out the marketing. And I still remember the day that she came in for the meeting and she sat down and she is like, shut the front door, because she had been promoting this, and the first month she sold maybe 150 copies, and the second month she sold maybe 250 copies. The third month she sold maybe 500 copies, and I'm making the numbers up, but you get the idea.
For sure.
And then she sold 10,000 copies. And then she went over 1 million copies. And then she had Amazon begging her to allow them to promote her. And she was able to
Wow.
walk into her day job and say, I quit.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
now she goes to Italy and sits on the balcony drinking her wine as she writes.
Isn't that
So
great?
I think if I could be personally mentored by anyone, it would be by Stina Holmes.
I think that that's a great tribute to Stina, and I'm sure that you have already been influenced by her in all that you do and in your writing, and as much as many of the other characters. And I'm curious, and we were talking a minute ago about the bedside table, what's on there. Have you adopted any of the tricks that you've seen in the writing that you've read already?
I'm sure I must have,
Yeah.
not perhaps consciously, overtly,
Hmm.
but I recognize good writing. I
Yeah.
appreciate good writing, and I try to make sure that my writing is good. Like
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
you know, I'll sit for a half an hour trying to get the sentence correct. You know,
Yeah. 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 No, sometimes
to
that's when you're
con
supposed to get up and walk away and then come back to it,
yeah,
right?
and to convey the feeling and to
Yeah.
convey the flavor. Um, I've certainly listened and learned from all of the workshops I've been in. There's certain rules in writing: show, don't tell. You know, um, and I really like deep point of view. Now, deep point of view is where you experience the scene from inside one of the characters, right? So
Yeah.
you feel what they feel, you hear what they hear, you see what they see. You don't see anything that they don't see. It's you're inside the character.
Hmm.
And that, I believe, helps the reader really, really become one with the story,
Hmm.
if you
Yeah.
can do that well, if you can get that deep point of view well. um and I hate head hopping. I hate it
Sorry.
when you're head hopping, it's
What's
called.
that? What's head hopping?
That's, head hopping is when you go from one person's point of view to the next person's, back to the first person's. Now you're in somebody else's head. It leaves the reader
Uh,
confused. What's going on? Because,
sure, sure, sure.
if I'm in Kathy's point of view,
Hmm.
then I don't know that Kathy's eyes are blue because I can't see my own eyes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, I understand. Hmm. Yeah.
Things like that. I don't know I have a zit on the end of my own nose, you know, um, unless I'm staring in the mirror, these kinds of things. There's one author who's very popular, who I shan't mention her name, but she's very, very popular. People love her, but she drives me nuts because I got one paragraph in his point of view. The next paragraph is saying something that only she would know. And then the next paragraph is back into his head. And it just like, you
Bouncing,
know,
bouncing, bouncing. It's like the big
yeah,
bouncing
I feel
ball.
like I'm on a pogo
Yeah.
stick. Yeah.
Yeah. So having some element of focus makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
Ellen, we are just about the end of our program. I can't believe that we're already up for the hour. It's been so great to understand what's going on through your eyes as the writer of these books. And I'm so delighted that you were able to join us today. For our listeners, if you've just tuned in, you have been listening to Act 3 on CHLY 101.7 FM. Super glad that you tune in every Monday at 1 o'clock. Thanks for doing so. As we're wrapping up the program, my favorite part of the show is coming up right now. And that's to sort of, kind of walk away with that takeaway, that sort of piece of wisdom that we want to imbibe on our listeners and or anyone who might be watching the program on YouTube or on Shaw. Tell me, you know, through all of this, what is your takeaway? What if you could imbibe a piece of wisdom on our listeners about writing and about your books and about the process, what might that look like for you?
Two words.
Okay,
Don't wait.
don't wait.
Don't
Yeah.
wait. If there's a story in your heart, start writing it down. It's not going to be perfect the first pen on paper. Don't be afraid of that. Write it down. Get the bones down. And you can, once the skeleton's out there on that paper, you can flesh it out, and you can take out the bits that don't work, and you can fix the bits that need fixed. But don't wait. Don't sit and think about it forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thumb in chair, hands on keyboard, get it down.
Get it
That's
down and
that's
don't wait.
that's my takeaway because we don't know how long we have.
Yeah.
And this may be, you may find that it's the most wonderful thing you've ever done, and you'll be sorry that you waited as long as you have already, you know?
Well, and I think about the legacy of it all. You're leaving something for your kids and your families and your footprint on this earth. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to share that wisdom and to have something written down, something tangible. I have an intention of writing a storybook one day in my future. I have most of my listeners all know that I had two Jack Russells for years, and unfortunately they passed away last year. But I plan on writing the story of Bobby Wilson because she was such a naughty, naughty, naughty little dog, and but so much fun, right? And so, and to
Mhm.
me it's the perfect childhood a legacy for my grandchildren, so I plan on doing that someday in the future when I've not got a bunch of other stuff on my plate. But I most definitely will be following and heeding your fantastic advice. Thanks for being on the show, Ellen. It was great to see you. And once again, to all of our listeners, you have been listening to Act 3 on CHLY, so make sure you tune in again next week. Thanks, Ellen.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
It really was. All right, everybody, that does it for this episode. We'll see you next time on Act 3.